The flight home had been smooth, the kind of uneventful journey that lets you unwind after days of cutthroat negotiations and endless boardroom meetings. A surprise return was supposed to be a treat for my wife and daughter, an unexpected reunion. Before the holiday rush, as I turned into the driveway, the familiar glow of our porch light greeted me, but what caught my attention first wasn't the warmth of home. It was the sleek, black Mercedes parked snugly in my garage. I slowed to a halt, staring at the car with its polished perfection, reflecting the faint moonlight. My stomach nodded. It didn't take me long to place it. I had seen that car a dozen times at company parties, its driver always smug, flashing veneers and shaking hands like he owned the world. Thomas Harrington, CEO of Vanguard Enterprises. My wife's boss, a sinking feeling, turned my stomach to lead. My heart hammered in my chest as 1,000 explanations churned through my mind, each one more implausible than the last. It wasn't just his car, it was here parked where my vehicle should have been. I killed the headlights and rolled the car forward in neutral, keeping my movements silent. By the time I stepped out, my jaw was clenched tight. I grabbed a small box from the corner of the garage, rummaging through its contents until my fingers closed around a handful of metal bolts. Without hesitation, I yanked open the hood of the Mercedes and tossed them deep into the engine's maze of parts. The tinkling sound of metal sliding into unforgiving places gave me a brief, vicious satisfaction. The thought of them upstairs together made my skin crawl. My house, my bed. I stepped into the house as quietly as a predator, stalking its prey, the familiar scent of lavender. Air freshener mixed sickeningly with the faint, nauseating waft of a man's cologne. Thomas's cologne, the safe, was next to the study, hidden in plain sight behind a row of law books that no one ever touched. I entered the combination, steady fingers. Bypassing the habitual clicks of the dial inside rested the Magnum 357, a gift from my father-in-law. My wife had always hated the gun. I reached for it with grim purpose, every second sharpening my sense of betrayal into a knife's edge. Her laughter filtered faintly from the bedroom upstairs. It wasn't a laugh, I recognized, not the warm, comforting one she shared with me, but something softer, sultrier. The bastard's laughter followed low and deep, like the rumble of a wolf, as I approached the stairs. My pulse roared in my ears. Drowning out the sound of my own footsteps, I took the first step, gripping the gun tightly, but before I could climb further, a voice stopped me. "Dad, wait, my daughter." Emily stood at the foot of the stairs. Her arms were crossed, but her expression was neither angry nor surprised. She stepped out of the shadows, the light catching her sharp, calculating eyes. "Don't dare to expose them. Right now," she whispered, her tone cold and deliberate. "I have a better plan, one that will ruin his life." I stared at her, stunned into silence. Emily's words barely registered as I stood, frozen, the weight of the Magnum still heavy in my grip. My blood thundered in my veins, demanding retribution, but there was something in her voice, sharp and unwavering, that pulled me back from the edge. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowed, her movements deliberate. "This isn't the way," she said, her voice low. "Not now, not like this." "What do you mean?" "Not like this," I hissed, the anger bubbling. They're up there in our bed. What do you expect me to do?" "Shake his hand." Emily's lips tightened into a hard line. "I know it hurts," she began, her tone eerily calm for someone in the middle of this chaos. "But think for a second. If you go up there." Now gun blazing, who loses the most? Her words cut deeper than I expected. My chest heaved, the cold metal of the gun pressing against my palm. "It's not just about me," I growled. It's about us, about this family. No, Dad, she said, and for the first time, I saw a glint of something dark in her eyes. It's about making him pay not just tonight, but for the rest of his life. She motioned toward the gun in my hand. You kill him. Now he's a martyr, a scandal for a week, a footnote in the news. Your life is ruined. Mom gets to play the grieving widow, and he's remembered as the tragic victim. Is that what you want? I stared at her, the boiling rage inside me, swirling with confusion. Emily leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Let me handle this. Let me destroy him in ways he'll never recover from. For a moment I couldn't speak. This wasn't the little girl I had raised. This was someone colder, someone with a plan. And your mother. I spat, my voice trembling with disgust. What? About her? Emily's expression didn't waver. She made her choice. You'll deal with her when the time is right. But, her eyes flicked toward the ceiling, where faint laughter continued to seep through the cracks. He'll regret ever stepping foot in this house. My grip on the gun faltered as I took a step back. Emily reached out and gently pried it from my hand. Go downstairs, she ordered. Wait for my signal. I wanted to argue, to scream, to march up those stairs and put an end to the farce. But something about Emily's unwavering demeanor held me in place reluctantly. I backed away and retreated to the living room. I sat on the couch, fists clenched, the sound of muffled voices and laughter above fueling my rage. Minutes ticked by, each one stretching into an eternity. I could barely hear the soft creak of the stairs as Emily ascended, her footsteps careful and deliberate. Then suddenly the laughter stopped. There was a loud thud, followed by a sharp cry of surprise. I bolted upright, instincts flaring. But before I could rush to the scene, I heard her voice, calm, authoritative. Get out! Emily barked, her tone cutting through the silence like a whip now. For a moment, there was no response. Then I heard Thomas's voice, shaky and confused. What the hell is going on? I said. Get out, Emily snapped. Unless you want me to call the police and tell them exactly what you've been doing here. Emily? My wife's voice started, but it was immediately silenced by my daughter's sharp interruption. Don't talk. I crept to the foot of the stairs, careful not to make a sound. From my vantage point, I could see Emily standing in the doorway to the bedroom. Her arms were crossed, her posture commanding. Thomas stood a few feet away, his shirt unbuttoned, his face pale. You're going to leave? Emily, said her voice cold, and you're going to stay out of our lives. If I see you near this house again, I'll destroy you. Thomas sneered, trying to regain his composure. You think you can scare me, kid. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Emily's lips curled into a sinister smile. Oh, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. That's why I already sent the pictures. His confidence wavered. What pictures? The ones of you and my married mother. She spat. You didn't notice the camera. I set up in the corner of the bedroom. Did you rookie mistake? They're already on their way to your wife's inbox, your board of directors, and every tabloid in the city. Thomas froze, his face twisting into a mask of horror. My wife let out a choked gasp. Emily, what have you done? She whispered. What you were too stupid to avoid, Emily snapped. Now both of you get the hell out of here. I watched, hidden in the shadows, as Thomas stormed past her, muttering curses under his breath. My wife followed, her face pale and tear-streaked. Emily stood in the doorway unmoving, until the sound of their footsteps faded into silence. When she finally turned to me, her expression was unreadable. Your turn, she said simply. Then she walked past me. The weight of the night settling over us both like a suffocating shroud. The silence in the house was unbearable, thick with betrayal, and rage. Emily had handled them both upstairs, but my anger was a living thing, clawing at my chest. The images of Thomas and my wife together refused to fade, burning into my mind with cruel precision. I sat in the kitchen, staring blankly at the magnum resting on the counter, its presence both tempting and tormenting. Emily entered her footsteps, calm, her face unreadable. She placed her phone on the table in front of me, its screen glowing with an email. Draft, take a look. She said, her voice cold. I leaned forward. The email was addressed to the Vanguard Enterprises Board of Directors, complete with a collection of incriminating photos of Thomas and my wife in the bedroom, images I hadn't even noticed her capturing. There were also attachments, files highlighting forged signatures, missing funds, and insider trading transactions. How did you? I started, but she cut me off. Thomas
is sloppy, she said flatly, and his assistant even sloppier. I've been digging for weeks ever since I noticed the way he looked at Mom during the Christmas party. She met my gaze, her voice hardening. You weren't the only one blindsided by this. I sat
back, the weight of her revelation sinking in. And you're sure this will work? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Emily smirked, a dark, vindictive expression that didn't belong on her youthful face. This isn't just going to ruin him, Dad. This
is going to obliterate him. The board will bury him to avoid scandal. His wife will clean him out in court. And when the SEC gets wind of his financial games, she leaned closer. He won't just lose his job, he'll lose his freedom. I should have felt
relief, maybe even gratitude. But all I felt was a hollow ache. And your mother? I asked, my voice tinged with bitterness. Emily's smile faded. She'll get what's coming to her too, she said quietly. But for now, Thomas goes first. Her finger danced over the phone screen as she hit send. The email disappeared into the void, a digital dagger aimed straight at the heart of Thomas's empire. The fallout came faster than I expected. By the next morning, the story had exploded across every financial news. Outlet Vanguard CEO accused of fraud and infidelity blared one headline scandal. At the top, Thomas Harrington under investigation proclaimed another. The attached articles detailed not only the financial crimes Emily had uncovered, but also the damning photographs of his affair. By noon, Emily and I were parked outside Vanguard's headquarters. She had insisted on coming here in person to watch the fallout. From the car, we could see a growing crowd of reporters swarming the building's entrance. Police cruisers were parked along the curb, their lights flashing ominously as we watched. Thomas emerged from the building, flanked by two uniformed officers. His suit was disheveled, his face pale and strained. The media descended on him, like vultures shouting questions he couldn't answer. His wife appeared moments later, storming out with a disgusted expression and an envelope in her hand. Divorce papers. I assumed Emily smiled as we watched the chaos unfold. Checkmate, she murmured, satisfaction dripping from every syllable. But I wasn't done. Not yet. That night, I waited for my wife to come home. She didn't know I had seen the car, that I had been in the house. During her betrayal, Emily had kept my presence a secret, letting her think she had escaped the consequences of her actions. When the front door finally creaked open, I was sitting in the living room, the magnum resting on the coffee table in front of me. The sight of it stopped her dead in her tracks. Steve, she stammered, her eyes darting between me and the gun. What's going on? I didn't answer. I just stared at her, my silence louder than any accusation. Finally, she broke down, tears streaming down her face as she dropped to her knees in front of me. I'm sorry, she sobbed.
It was a mistake, a stupid, horrible mistake. Please, you have to believe me. I leaned forward, my voice low and icy. You're sorry that you got caught, or sorry that you threw away this family for a bastard? Like Thomas? Her sobs grew louder, but
They didn't move me. I stood towering over her, my anger finally finding its voice. You disgust me. I spat you, humiliated me. You destroyed us. Please, she begged, reaching for my hand. I'll do anything. I'll fix this. You'll leave. I interrupted my eye.
tone final, you'll pack your things and get out of my house, out of my life? She froze, her expression shifting from desperation to shock. You can't mean that, she whispered. I do, I said, my voice steel, and don't think you're walking away with a penny.
The Prupal SE that you made sure to sign it before we married, remember? Or were you too busy planning your affair? Her face crumpled, the weight of my words crushing her. I stepped past her, heading toward the stairs. Begone by morning, I said over my shoulder. By the end of the week, both Thomas and my wife were relics of my past. His empire lay in ruins. His name forever tainted. She had left the house with nothing but a suitcase. Her pleas for forgiveness falling on deaf ears. As for Emily, she returned to her studies as if nothing had happened, but I couldn't look at her the same way. The cold, calculating side of her I had witnessed was a reminder that the apple didn't fall far from the tree, and though I had won the war, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost something far more precious in the process. My family was gone, and the home I had built now stood as a hollow monument to betrayal and revenge. The weeks that followed were a blur, the pieces of my old life dissolving. One by one, my wife was gone, her belongings, her laughter, her lies, all stripped away. Thomas's downfall had been spectacular, leaving his career and reputation obliterated under the weight of Emily's carefully orchestrated revenge. But there was no peace in victory, not for me. The house felt cavernous, the silence suffocating. I walked its halls like a ghost, haunted by the memories of what had been and the brutal truth of what it had become. Emily and I barely spoke. Her presence in the house, a constant reminder of the cold ruthlessness she had wielded that night. I thought it was over. I thought the storm had passed. I was wrong. It started with a phone call. The number was unfamiliar, but something about the incessant ringing made me
Answer hello, I said, my voice roughed from lack of sleep. Steve, a man's voice rasped on the other end. It was low, venomous, and unmistakable. Thomas? I gripped the phone tighter, my heart hammering. What the hell do you want? I growled, a bitter laugh.
crackled through the line. You think this is over? You think you can take everything from me and walk away clean? You did this to yourself. I snapped. Now you're just another washed-up fraud. You've got no one to blame but yourself. Oh, I'll take the
Blame, he said, his voice a chilling mix of rage and amusement. But you're going to pay for it, you and that little witch of a daughter. The line went dead before I could respond, leaving me with nothing but the ominous weight of his words.
I wasn't a fool. I knew Thomas was desperate, and desperation makes people dangerous over the next few days. I took precautions, changed the locks, installed security cameras, made sure Emily wasn't traveling alone, but no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of some unseen threat lurking just beyond my reach. Then came the break-in. It was late past midnight when the sound of glass shattering jolted me. Awake, I grabbed the magnum from the nightstand and moved through the house, every
muscle in my body tense. The cameras hadn't alerted me to anything, but I knew someone was inside. As I reached the living room, I saw the silhouette, a hulking figure outlined against the moonlight. Streaming through the broken window, he was holding a crowbar.
His movements deliberate, his presence unmistakably threatening. Stop right there, I barked, raising the magnum The figure froze his head, tilting slightly as if weighing his options. "I didn't come here to fight." Steve Thomas's voice drawled from the darkness.
"I came here to talk." "Talk?" I sneered, keeping the gun trained on him. Breaking into my house in the middle of the night isn't exactly a conversation starter. He stepped forward, the faint glow of the moon revealing his face. He looked worse than I expected.
Hollow cheeks, bloodshot. "Eyes a man pushed to the brink, you ruined me," he said, his voice trembling, with barely suppressed rage. "My career, my marriage, everything I built gone because of you. You should have thought about that before screwing my wife I shot." Back, his lips twisted into a bitter smile. "Oh, it's not about her anymore. She was just a pawn. Just like your daughter, my blood turned twice. What did you say? You think Emily's innocent in all this?" he taunted. Stepping closer, "She played me just as much."
"As she played you do. You even know what she's capable of." "Shut up!" I snapped, my grip tightening on the gun, but he kept coming. "She came to me first. Steve," he said, his voice dripping with malice, "months ago, told me you were out of the picture, that she wanted
"Power money, she even liar." I roared, firing a warning shot into the floorboards. The sound echoed through the house, deafening and final. Thomas froze, his eyes wide with shock. "You don't know your own daughter," he whispered, a twisted grin creeping onto his face. And now it's too late. Before I could respond, the lights snapped on, flooding the room. With blinding clarity, Emily stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. She held her phone in one hand, its screen glowing with a live feed from the security.
"Cameras, Dad," she said calmly, her gaze shifting from me to Thomas. "Put the gun down, Emily, stay back." I warned, my heart pounding. "He's dangerous." But she didn't listen. She walked toward us, her movements measured and deliberate. "He's not the one you should be worried about," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. Thomas laughed. "Adri, humorless sound, there it is," he said, shaking his head. The mask comes off. I looked at Emily, confusion and fear wearing within me. "What is he talking about?" I demanded. She tilted her head here, is glinting with something cold, unreadable. "He's talking about leverage, Dad," she said, her tone casual, "and how he lost his the moment he stepped into this house." Before I could process her words, she pulled something from her pocket, a small black
device with a blinking red light. She pressed a button, and Thomas's voice filled the room, distorted but unmistakable. "I'll burn your life to the ground, you and that little witch of a daughter." Her trap was perfect. Thomas's face twisted, and panic as their realization.
"Hit him, you," he started, but Emily cut him off. "You're done, Thomas," she said, her voice cold and final. "The police will love hearing how you broke in here to threaten us. You think this will stop me?" He snarled, his bravado cracking. Emily's smile was razor
Sharp number, but jail will. The sirens in the distance grew louder, their wail cutting through the night. Thomas lunged, his desperation finally boiling over. But before he could reach me, I swung the butt of the magnum into his temple, sending him crashing to the floor. Emily stepped over his unconscious form, her expression calm as he pocketed the recording device. "You did well, Dad," she said, her voice eerily soothing. I stared at her, the adrenaline fading, replaced by a gnawing unease. "Emily, what have we become?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward the flashing lights outside, the sound of sea doors slamming announcing the arrival of the police survivors. She said simply, before walking out to meet them, the hours after the police took Thomas away were surreal. A blur of flashing lights, scribbled reports and whispered reassurances from uniformed officers. Emily handled everything with an unsettling composure, recounting the events to the authorities with precise calculated detail. She painted herself as the hero, who had outwitted a dangerous intruder and I as the bewildered, but grateful father stood by in silence, letting her orchestrate the narrative. When the officers finally left the house, fell into an oppressive quiet. The adrenaline had long since burned out, leaving a hollow ache in its place. Emily stood in the kitchen, sipping tea as if the night had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. I couldn't take it anymore. "Emily," I said, my voice low and unsteady, "we need to talk." She turned her face, serene, her demeanor almost infuriatingly calm. "What about this?" I said, gesturing vaguely around the room. "About what you've done, about what we've done." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she said, nothing waiting for me to continue. "You planned this?" I said, the words coming out slower than I intended, as if I were afraid to give them voice. "You didn't just react to what happened. You've been pulling strings, manipulating me, manipulating him, all of it." She set the teacup down carefully, the porcelain clinking softly against the counter. "Of course I did," she said, her tone matter.
"Of fact, Thomas weighs a threat. Mum was a liability I handled." "You handled it?" I repeated, disbelief creeping into my voice. "Emily, you've destroyed lives, not just his, your mother's. Mine destroyed lives," she interrupted, her voice sharp now. "No, Dad, isaved us. I saved you. If I hadn't stepped in, you'd be sitting in a jail cell right now for murder. And Mum, she made her choice the moment she brought that man into this house. That doesn't make it right." I snapped, my voice rising. This coldness, this calculating version of you, it's not normal, it's not you." She tilted her head, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You think this is new?" she asked quietly. "You think I just became this person overnight?" I faltered her words, hitting harder than I expected.
"I've been watching this family fall apart for years. Dad," she continued, her voice hardening, "you were so busy with your work, so distracted by everything else that you didn't see. Mom was checked out long before Thomas showed up. You were too blind to
notice. Someone had to step up." I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping me. "And you think that's justification for lying, for blackmail, for setting him up?" "Yes," she said without hesitation, "because now he's gone, Mum's gone, and you and I, we're free," I echoed,
the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "Is that what you call this mess? I've lost everything. Emily, my marriage, my peace, my family." And for what? The eyes softened just for a moment, and for the first time that night, I thought I saw a flicker of vulnerability. "You still have me," she said quietly, "and I still have you." Her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to see the daughter I had raised, the girl housed, to beg me to read her bedtime stories, and who cried when she
skinned her knees. But that girl was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Someone forged in betrayal, resentment, and cunning. I slumped into a chair, my head in my hands. "Emily, I don't know who you are anymore." She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, a sharpness that cut through me. "I'm the person who made us sure we survived. Dad, you might not like it, but that's the truth." She turned to leave, her footsteps echoing softly on the hardwood floor. At
the doorway, she paused, glancing back at me. "You can hate me if you want, but you're alive, and so am I. That's all that matters." Then she was gone, disappearing up the stairs, and leaving me alone. In the suffocating silence, the days turned into weeks, and life settled into an uneasy rhythm. Emily carried on as if nothing had happened, focusing on her studies and maintaining a facade of normalcy. But I couldn't shake the weight of everything that had transpired. The house felt like a melumiach room haunted by the ghosts of what we had lost and what we had become. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself in Emily's room. It was spotless, almost unnervingly. So, with everything neatly arranged and in its place on her desk, was a notebook, its pages filled with scribbled notes, timelines and connections. It was a map of her plans, a killing testament to the depth of her foresight. At the center of it all was one name mine. My blood ran cold as I read the notes, observations about my behavior, predictions about my reactions, calculations about how far I could be pushed and manipulated. She hadn't just planned Thomas's downfall, she had planned everything, including my role in it. I closed the notebook and sat in the dark, the weight of her words from that night echoing in my mind. You still
have me and I still have you. But as I stared at the meticulously organized room, the truth became clear. I didn't have her, not really the daughter I had loved. The person I thought I knew was gone, and in her place was someone far more dangerous, someone who
had learned to survive at any cost,